Good morning, Morai v'Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Vav Amud Bet, 10 lines down from the top of the Amud by 2 dots. Today's Amud is being learned as Zchut Refuah Shelema for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, that should have Refuah Shelema, and also for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahit, that should have full recovery, Refuah Shelema, Bezat Hashem, Amen. This month's learning of the community has been dedicated graciously by the Shea family, by Cohen family, by Dayan families. Should be an ultimate zchut for all the mishpachot, Bezat Hashem, Amen. Okay, so we started the discussions of the Mishnah one by one. We already have covered why a sukkah that is taller than 20 amah is pasul. We said 3/4 different reasons for that. We discussed the reason for a sukkah that's lower than 10 tfachim, that's pasul. We discussed according to Rabbi Meir, we know it from the Pasuk. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we know it from Halacha Moshe Sinai. And now, for the third part, the Mishnah said, "V'she'en la shalosh lefanot." A sukkah that does not have 3 walls is pasul. You need a minimum of 3 walls for the sukkah to be kasher. So says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, we learned, Shtaim keilchatan ushlishit afilu tefach. Now you need 2 walls that are full, and the third one doesn't have to be a full wall. It could be just a tefach. Now we will see in the Gemara that this too is Halacha Moshe Sinai. Halacha Moshe Sinai tells us that the third wall doesn't have to be a full wall. It could be just a tefach. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Omer, it's machloket Tanaim. You thought that this is as simple of Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Oseticha Meres Mitzrayim. Aside from that pasuk, pretty much everything else is machloket. Here also you have machloket Tanaim. That Rabbi Shimon says, no, you really actually need 4 walls. 3 walls is not sufficient. Rabbi Shimon Omer, shalosh kilchatan, urvit afilu tefach. The 4th one could be a tefach, but the first 3 need to be full walls. Now, so what everybody could agree is that the last wall could be a tefach. Again, that we learn from Halacha Moshe Sinai, as we'll see. But how many full walls you need? It's either 2 or 3 full walls. So says the Gemara, b'ma kamifligi. What is the core of this machloket? And the Gemara says, Rabbanan Savri yesh em lamasoret, v'Rabbi Shimon Savar yesh em lemikra. The question over here is if it's em lamasoret or em lemikra. What does that mean? Let's explain. This is one of the threads that go through the entire Shas, explaining many different machlokets and concepts in halacha, because we all recognize that the Torah writes certain things differently than the way they're read. Right? Sometimes something is written in one way, read in a different way, and that obviously is done very meticulously and calculated by the Torah. Why exactly it is that the Torah writes something one way, one time, and another way a different time. And it becomes a question within the Tanaim, when we darshin the psukim, do we follow the way it's written, which would be em la masoret. The masoret is the minhag, the Kabbalah that we have from generation after generation, that this word, despite the way it's read, it's not written the way it's read, it's written differently in the Torah. You need a masoret for that, right? As you can't just write the Torah based on what you hear, right? You have to write it the way it's been given down the generations, as we'll just momentarily see one clear example of which. And others, they believe, no, you darshin the psukim the way they are read. Well, after all, there is a reason that they're read the way they're read, even despite the fact that they're written differently. So therefore, when darshaning the psukim, you go after the way we hear them, they're read not after the way they're written in the Torah. That's called Em LeMikra, the mother of the Mikra. You go after the source, the mother, in the way it's read, versus Em LaMasoret, which is the way it has been passed down the generations to be written, but it's not read like that. That's why you need the Masoret. You need the tradition of how it's written, despite the way we hear it in the Tzibur when it's read. Okay? Em LaMasoret, Em LaMikra. Now, why is this significant here? Says the Gemara. Because there are 3 psukim, they're back to back, really. There are 2 psukim, that Sukkot is mentioned 3 times in these 2 psukim, and twice it's written one way, and one time it's written different way. So the pasuk writes, the full pasuk reads, "Basukot teshavu shivat yamim." You should sit in Sukkah 7 days. Kol ha'ezrach beYisrael yeshvu basukot. Everyone should sit in Sukkot. Leman yedu dorotechem ki basukot, for a 3rd time, because I want all the generations to know that I sat the Jews in Sukkot. Be'otziot meres Mitzrayim ani Hashem. When I took them out of Mitzrayim, I am Hashem Elokechem. Fine. So if you pay a slight attention, you see that there's 3 times that seems like a redundancy. You don't need to say all those. Aside from the redundancy, it has another problem, and that is the first 2 times that the pasuk mentions Sukkot, right? Basukot teshvu shivat yamim, kol ha'ezrach beYisrael yeshvu basukot. Those are written Sukkat without a second vav. If you would write this, I would read it Sukkat, which would mean the singular sukkah. Sukkot with a vav would mean plural form. Few Sukkot, at least 2, right? Mi'ut rabim shenayim, the minimum of a plural is 2. Now, they are all read Sukkot plural, right? But Sukkot teshvu shivat yamim, right? All 3 of them are read the same way. If you would just listen to the pasuk, you would not know how they're written. But they're written in this way, exactly in this order. Besukat, besukat, basukot, right? So, why is that significant? Because, well, if you darshin em lamasoret, the way they're written, then how many sukkot do you have to darshin? 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4. It's amazing, right? You have 4 to deal with, to work with. If you paskin em lemikra, then how many do you have? You have 6. So that makes, as you'll see, that makes all the difference in dealing with this. And the Gemara now is going to go through 4 different ways of understanding and darshaning this psukim, which each one of them explains the machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon. Right? Different ways of understanding how Rabbi Shimon and Chachamim looked at this 2 psukim and came up with what they came up with.
How do you get 4 and 6?
Well, this is 1. That's why I wrote this here. 1 plus 1 plus 2. This is simple math, guys. In contrast to what we're going to get to, it's going to be very complex math. This is 2 plus 2 plus 2, right? So you have 4 if you darshin only this. I know it's a little confusing because there's 3 sukkot, but it's really 1 plus 1 plus 2, because this one is plural form. Verses 6. Okay, so it says the Gemara, and now pay attention, we're going to slowly go through this. 4 separate ways of looking at this machloket, but all of them are working with this premise. So says the Gemara, Besukot, 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 harekan, shesh. So says the, skip, sorry. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan savri yesh em la masoret. When we say Chachamim hold em la masoret, the way it works is besukat, basukat, basukot. That's 1 plus 1 plus 2. Hare kan arba. You have 4 elements to deal with, to darshin. Dal chad legufe. Of course, you need 1 for the mitzvah of sukkah itself, right? One of them is actually saying you should sit in the sukkah for 7 days, right? Without that, you don't know that there's a mitzvah to sit in the sukkah. So one of them you can't use because you need for the actual conceptual halakha that the pasuk is teaching you. So you're left with 3 to deal with. So says the Gemara, Pashu leu terata. You have 3. Shtaim kilchatan ushlish ve'ata yehilcheta ve'garate leshlishit ve'ukmeh atefach. When you have 3 to work with, and you have a halakha Moshe Misinai that quantifies and defines for you the 3rd one, says the 3rd one we learned before. By the way, this is a new thing. The Gemara says it so subtly, as if like we know this pashut. Just a daf ago, we said that when we talk about shiurin, chatzitzin, umechitzin, halakha Moshe Misinai, that the measurements of the Torah, the concept of chatzitza in tevilah, and the mechitzot of sukkah is halakha Moshe Misinai. The Gemara didn't mention anything about this. We mentioned that the fact that the mechitzah of the sukkah has to be 10 tfachim high is halakha Moshe Misinai, right? But unbeknownst to us, there is another halakha Moshe Misinai regarding the walls of the sukkah that everybody agrees with, and that is that the last wall of the sukkah does not have to be a full wall, but could rather be a tefach wide, and that's good enough. That's also halakha Moshe Misinai. So it says the Gemara, we have 4 minus 1 that you need for the concept of sukkah itself, that you have to know to sit in the sukkah. So you have 3 to work with, and then halakha Moshe Misinai says that the 3rd one really is not a full one; it's just a tefach. So you have 2.5 walls, and that's good enough. Who is that? Rabbanan, right? So hence the first explanation of Rabbanan. Now, how does Rabbi Shimon look at that? Rabbi Shimon savar yesh em lemikra. He says no, yesh em lemikra, right? So what do we have? 2 plus 2 plus 2. But he also besukot, basukot, basukot. 2 plus 2 plus 2. Harekan shesh. This is 6. Dal chad kra legufe, but one of them you can't use. The first time it says basukot, you can't use it. So it's minus how many? 2. Not minus 1, because you're taking 1 sukot out, right? So how many do you have now? 4. 4 left. Pashu lehu arba. You're left with 4. Shalosh kilchatan. And it's coming to tell you, of course, halakha Moshe Misinai is coming to diminish the 4th one to a tefach. So what you're ending with is 3 full walls, and the 4th one, afilu tefach. Right? Pretty simple. This makes it sound like very, very simple logical discourse. Now, says the Gemara, the 4th one we learn from halakha Moshe Misinai that's going to be sufficient with the tefach. And hence, the first explanation, first out of 4 explanations of the Gemara in understanding Machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. Says the Gemara, or alternatively, I could explain the Machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon in a completely different way, or slightly different way. Ve'ibait ema, and if you want, I could explain. The kule alma yesh em lemikra. Everybody agrees that there is em lemikra, which means this, right? You have 6 to work with. Everyone agrees that you follow the way it's read. So you have basukot, 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 2 plus 2 plus 2, 6. Fine. So how do you end up with 3 and 2.5 or 3.5? You know what the Machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon is? Mor Savar, one of them holds Schacha Bayakra. One of them holds the Schach itself needs a pasuk, because the Torah says sit in the sukkah, but the fact that you have to have a Schach, right? That it can't be just a 4 walls with open air on top, or that you need a Schach kasher, that also needs a pasuk. So therefore, I'm using one for that and one for this. Umor savar schacha lo bayakra. And the other one holds, schach does not need a pasuk. So how does that work? Take a look at lo bayakra. The mashma'uta tikufeh nafka, the sukkah blo schach lo mikriya. Sukkah without schach is not, sukkah means schach. The word sukkah comes from sochech, comes from the language of schach, the word schach. So therefore I don't need a drasha for that. Hence, I know that I could use all of the remaining ones for this drasha. So I have 6, and I knocked out 2 already. That's old news, because you need the concept of the mitzvah of sukkah. So you can't use one of the sukkots. So you have 4 to deal with, right? Chachamim hold, you have 4 to deal with, yes, but you need one of them for schach, to know that you have schach kasher. You can't use all 4 for the walls. You need one sukkah for the schach. So you're left with how many? 3, right? In other words, 6 minus 2 to begin with, that's on the onset already, right? It's a surcharge. Like, you have, that's the beginning. And you have 4 to work with. The 4, one of them I need for schach. I'm left with 3, and out of the 3, the Halakha Moshe Sinai defines that the third one could be half. So I have 2 full ones, and the third one, afilu tefach. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, you don't need one for schach. You don't need one for schach. And therefore, you have 4, and the Halakha Moshe Sinai says one of them could be even half, could be even tefach. So you need 3 full walls, and the 4th one, afilu tefach. Right? This is slightly different, explaining how everyone could be dealing with emla mikra, and still we will be good to go. Veibayit ema, or I could say, says the Gemara, the kule alma yesh emla masoret. I could even explain. Now the Gemara has to do this, by the way, because the Gemara is trying to say that we understand that this massive, monstrous machloket, emla mikra, emla masoret, is something that, as we said in the beginning, is a thread that goes through the whole Shas. So lest you going to ask questions, so, if you have emla mikra in Sukkah only according to Rabbanan, how do you understand this Sukkah and that Sukkah and the other Sukkah? Rest sure, we could make the entire machloket Rabbanan and Shimon work according to emla mikra completely, or according to emla masoret completely. So says the Gemara, we already explained how you can have the entire thing based on lemikra. Now the Gemara says I could do the whole thing when you have emla masoret. So you're starting not with 6 but with 4. And says the Gemara, v'haka b'haka miflegi. And the machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon is more savar ki ata ilcheta legareya. One of them says, as we understood until now, and we took it for granted, that when Halakha Moshe Sinai comes into picture is to define that the third wall that you already know exists, or the 4th wall that you already know exists, doesn't have to be a full wall. It could be just a tefach. Who says that that's what Halakha Moshe Sinai is teaching you? Maybe Halakha Moshe Sinai is coming to add, not to subtract. It's coming to add the 4th or the 3rd wall that you don't even know exists. Not that he's coming to diminish an already existing wall and stand it up to 1 tefach. Says the Gemara, Umor savar, the other one holds, ki ata hilcheta lehosif. The other one holds, when we have Halakha Moshe Sinai is coming to add a 4th wall, not to make sure that the 3rd wall could be a small 1 tefach wide wall. So in other words, if it would be back to the whiteboard, we would say we have 4 to work with, right? So one of them you knocked out for the concept of sukkah. So you really have 3 to work with, right? And if you have 3 to work with, Chachamim say, well, 3 to work with means you have 3 walls, and we know that there's Halakha Moshe Sinai to define that the third one could be only a tefach. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that's not what Halacha Moshe Sinai is telling you. I know already 3 walls from the pasuk. Halacha Moshe Sinai is coming to tell you that on top of this, you need a 4th wall, but a tiny little 4th wall. It's coming to add, not to take away. And that's the machloket Rabbi Shimon and Chachamim. So says the Gemara, ve'ibait ema, and the fourth and the final attempt is, I could explain the kule alma ki atai hilcheta legareya. I could explain that according to everybody, Halacha Moshe Sinai is coming to diminish, as we understood originally. Ve'yesh em lamasoret, and on top of that, there is em lamasoret. That means we have the way it is written, which gives us 4. Now you're scratching your head, says, how are you going to do this, right? If you have 4 to begin with, and you need 1 for the concept of Sukkah, so you have 3, and the Halacha Moshe Sinai is coming to take away 1, right? Which gives you 2. How in the world are you going to end up with 4, right? It's a challenge. So the Gemara says, very simple. Says the Gemara, vehacha bedorshin techilot kamiflegi. Here, the machloket is also a general machloket in Shas, whether or not you could be dorshin techilot. What does it mean, dorshin techilot? It means whether or not you could darshin the very first pasuk that is coming to teach you the concept of Sukkot. In other words, the Torah tells us, Basukot teshavu shivat yamim, kol ha'ezrach ve'Yisrael yeshavu basukot. The literal translation of the pasuk is telling you, you should sit in the sukkah, right? Now, can I say that even though that the pasuk is using the word Sukkot to tell me that I need to sit in the sukkah, but I don't need to use that as one of the 4 or the 6 that I have over here, because that's literally the translation of the pasuk. It's not a drasha. I still have a full 4 or a full 6 to deal with when it comes to darshaning the psukim. So if you tell me, dorshin tchilot, that the very first pasuk that says Sukkot, I also could darshin for drashot of the pasuk, then I don't have 3, but I have a full 4 to deal with. So therefore, says the Gemara, bedorshin techilot kamiflegi. More savar chachamim who say you need 2 walls and a 3rd afilu tefach, they hold that you can't be doresh techilot, right? So you have 4 to work with. You need 1 of them for the concept of Sukkah, so you don't have 4 really, you have 3 to deal with. And Halacha Moshe Sinai is coming to say the 3rd one could be small, tiny tefach wall. Rabbi Shimon says, no, dorshin techilot. I could use the first one out as well for the drasha, because the concept of sitting in the sukkah I know from the translation of the pasuk. I don't need a drasha. It says it. It literally says it. So I don't need that for drasha. I really have 4 to work with. So once I have 4 to work with, the only thing that Halacha Moshe Sinai is coming to tell me is the 4th one doesn't have to be a full wall. So I need 3 full walls, and the 4th one will be afilu tefach. So that's the 4 different ways to understanding of how machloket Rabbi Shimon and Chachamim comes to be. And of course, when we have machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon, halacha will be like Chachamim, right? Now, Rabbi Shimon, in most places, the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon when it's mentioned in the discussion with Chachamim. That's a general rule around Shas. But here, we have another thing at work as well, which usually, Yachid v'Rabim, halacha k'Rabim. Usually when we have machloket, Yachid and Chachamim, halacha becomes like Chachamim, whether it is really Chachamim, whether it is a Stam Mishnah, that Rebbe calls it Chachamim, B'lashon Rabim, to just tell you that that's halacha, even though that's not necessarily a plural form, you have that element also in several places in Shas as well. So says the Gemara, Rab Matna Amar Tamed Rabbi Shimon Mechacha. This is 4 ways of explaining Rabbi Shimon and Chachamim together. Rab Matna says no. Rabbi Shimon does not have to argue with Chachamim in this way. He has a different reason from a different pasuk, by the way. The pasuk says, "V'sukat lesel yoma mechorev." This is a pasuk that we are very familiar with from the Nevuah of Yeshaya. Last time we had this, the Gemara was busy discussing whether or not this is applicable to all the Sukkot, or maybe it's Bimot HaMashiach, L'Atid Lavo. But we know, we're familiar with the pasuk in Yeshayahu that Sukkah is going to be Letzel Yomam. It's going to be a protection from the providing tzel, right? Providing the shade, but not just that. Mechorev ul machse ul mistor mizerem umimatar is going to be also a protection from winds and from all the elements outdoors. So says the Gemara, says Rab Matna, this is a very defining pasuk about the very structure of the sukkah, because Rabbi Shimon learned this pasuk. Well, we know that Nevi'im cannot be mechadesh davar, right? Cannot create new concepts of halacha, right? Well, we learned this in the Gemara in the very beginning, Daf Gimel of Masechet Megillah, has come up many times. It's discussed in Masechet Moed Katan, towards the beginning of the first parak, and many other places as well. There we're talking about, concept of tefillin for an avel, right? Nevi'im cannot create new halachot, but could define the halachot that are mentioned already in the Chumash. So here you have the concept that's there in the Chumash with the walls and everything, and says Rab Matna, Rabbi Shimon learned an exhibit in the halachot of Sukkah from this pasuk in Yeshaya, because the pasuk clearly says it's not just sufficient merely to have a schach on top of your head. Yes, Sukkah means a schach. Yes, we need shade, right? You need that, but the pasuk has a continuation which says, it has to protect you from winds and from the matar as well, from the rain as well. And you cannot have 2 walls and sit in there and be protected. It just work like that, right? The wind and the matar is going to be all over you in that way. Even if you have shlishid afilu tefach, even if you have a 3rd wall, which is a tefach is like this big, right? Says the Gemara, therefore, he read this pasuk, and he says, you need to have a 3rd wall full, and then the 4th wall could be the one that's afilu tefach, because you need that just that level of protection. Now, the Gemara is going to start a fantastic back and forth of where do you put this 3rd wall, right? Really, where do you put all the walls? Can I have an L shape and the 3rd one would be just in the corner, right? Meaning the simple understanding would be that I have 1, 2, and the 3rd one would be either here or either here. That would be the simple understanding, which we're going to see Rav is going to say, right? But can I have it here? Can I have it in a diagonal? Instead of this, can I have it like this? Can I have the 3 walls like this, 2 like this, and the 3rd one here or here or here or here? Does that work? When you tell me Shnayim ki l'chatan u'shlishit afilu tefach, how in the world is it going to work exactly? Can I be creative and do whatever I want? Or maybe not. So let's start this. This is really going to be a Gemara for tomorrow, which is actually one of the most important Gemarot, which I think it's not known well to the people who actually make sukkah out of their backyard when they have already existing walls and they already need to put the 3rd wall there, right? And many times they become very creative of how they make the 3rd wall, and sometimes it is possible actually. So it actually comes out to be very handy, very relevant, says the Gemara, "Ve'oto tefach echa ma'amido." Where do you put that third tefach, that third wall? That's afilu tefach. Amar Rav ma'amido keneged hayotze. Rav says you put it keneged hayotze, which simply understanding. Tomorrow we'll see that this simply is not so simple. Says Rav, simply understanding would be either this, meaning you have two here and the third one here, or you have two here and the third one here. That's the Rav, and Rav Kana, his student, one of the top students of Rav, and Rav Asi, two top students of Rav. They say, how about doing it on a diagonal over here? Can we do that? In other words, can the third one just be anywhere? We'll see the details of all of this tomorrow. Tomorrow is a very important Amud. It's not an Amud that you want to miss. Zaku Baruch.